Yeah, this is the 415ers 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Reaction episode here today to the 49ers falling to the Falcons 28-14 on the road in week 6, now 3-3 on the year. I do want to stick with that, Mark, because like that drive just it sort of encapsulated to me the effort level that I saw from the 49ers today. And you could make the case that a lot of that has to do with the personnel out there. But also on that drive, look, maybe it's a quicker drive if Jake Brendel doesn't get called for a hold on Brandon Ayuk's, 30-yard catch down the field.
Yeah.
It like those were the kind of plays that seemed to stand out quite frequently, especially in that second half with the amount of drops that we've already highlighted. And then, of course, the inopportune penalties. And to just bring it all back to what we started with, like there was just I thought, a lack of discipline defensively. Offense not being able to capitalize on the chances that the Falcons did give them. Like the 49ers, when they were able to quote unquote get into rhythm, did move the ball on the Falcons. And we saw on those 2 touchdown drives in the first half, they could certainly score and they could move the ball quickly. Second half, it just didn't happen, and they couldn't find a rhythm. And I think you're right that the running game is the key to all of this. Like, this is where the 49ers will win and lose football games at most levels. Maybe not against bottom feeders like Carolina, but they're going to lose football games if they do not run the ball well. In the Shanahan era, when the 49ers do not rush for 100 yards, they are 8-25. 3 of those wins came in 2019. So if you take that out, the rest of those years, they are 5-24. This year, they are now 1-3 when they do not eclipse the 100 rushing yard mark. They need to pound the rock. And it's difficult to do that when you fall behind 14-0. But I didn't really see any commitment into the run, especially in the second half, until that final drive, ironically, when it looked like they were trying to kill clock down 14.
Yeah, and I'm 100% with you. The running game is strange. I mean, you mentioned the numbers where Kyle Shanahan generally unsuccessful when his team does not hit 100 or more rushing yards, and he was not close to that today. 50 rushing yards for the 49ers. The last time they got, 50 or fewer in a game, the NFC Championship game against the Rams, which is strange because they were leading for much of that game. They had 50 rushing yards on 20 attempts against the Rams in the NFC title game last season. You think back to when was the last time they had fewer than 50 yards on the ground in a game? That was way back in the regular season last year against the Arizona Cardinals. That was week 9 when the Niners lost to Colt McCoy and the Cardinals 31-17. That one's a little more understandable because you were down early in that game. But the numbers on that game on the ground, pitiful. They only
Oh
ran the
boy.
ball for 39 yards in that game back in week 9 against the Cardinals. So it's hard to find, a game similar to this one in terms of the rushing numbers. And, Kyle Shanahan was asked after the game on that 3rd and 1 and then 4th and 2 play before the turnover on downs that sealed the game. They ran the ball to Tevin Coleman. He lost a yard, and then the throw to Deebo Samuel knocked away and incomplete, and the game's over. He was asked, why not go for the quarterback sneak on that 3rd and 1? That's kind of where you've got a lot of conversions this year and in the past with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he said that was an option, but we went somewhere else. I'm not really one to say that maybe the quarterback sneak was a better option. I honestly was thinking you should probably throw the ball on 3rd and 1 because the clock was beginning to run down. But I guess it's splitting hairs at this point. But I'm with you. The run game, the Niners simply are not going to win games when you rush for 50 yards. That's the bottom line. I don't care if you're down 14 points in the first half or not. I mean, despite the fact that they were down 14 points 2 different times, it was tied in the second quarter. They were down by 7 uh, for a lot of the time between the end of the second and into the start of the third. The Niners absolutely lost the kind of the double dip end of the first half, start of the second half, where they normally do really well. They got the ball after the Falcons touchdown to take the lead late in the second quarter. That was where the Garoppolo interception happened on the last play of the half. and then they do nothing on their first drive offensively in the third quarter. The Falcons respond by immediately scoring a touchdown to make it a 2-score game. So if we were maybe to pinpoint one area, Evan, where the game was lost, I think you could certainly point towards the end of the game, that long 8-minute drive where there was not much urgency. And maybe that's just bad situational football more so than, a place to point and send blame to for the loss. I think you can probably look to those final 5 minutes of the first half, first 5 minutes of the second half. That really is where the game turned. And it's generally where the Niners play well, but that was not the case today.
Well, and also that's around the time, to your point off the top, that's around the time some of those injuries that happen in game also went down. Charvarius Ward goes down in the second quarter. I know Mike McGlinchey gave it his best effort to get back out onto the field, but he goes down with a calf injury in the second quarter. Third quarter officially ruled out along with Mooney Ward. And then around that time too, that's where the drops come. Atlanta takes advantage today on third down, which was something that I kind of felt but didn't realize how good Atlanta was on third down until about midway through the third quarter. They were 9 for 14 today on third down, and a lot of those were close situations in which you're able to have the option, which seemed to give the Niners a lot of fits to run or pass, but situational football, and I don't know if you noticed this today too. But there were a lot more missed tackles today, including a couple even by the likes of Fred Warner. I mean, he didn't wrap up on a couple plays. Hufanga, who, as you mentioned, was out early and then came back in. He wasn't around the football as much as we're accustomed to seeing him. Credit Atlanta, certainly. But there just wasn't as much execution on the 49ers side than Atlanta. That's just the way that it felt to me. And I think that's a great point of where the game turned, because you kind of saw everything coming into focus as far as Atlanta executing, getting on track, taking advantage of who wasn't on the field for the 49ers, and then San Francisco not being able to overcome that. And then along with also shooting themselves in the foot, dropping some big passes.
Yeah, and to your point about the tackling, I think maybe even in addition to some of the missed tackles, I think this was also the first time we consistently saw opposing ball carriers, whether it was Caleb Huntley or Tyler Algier. Huntley rushed 16 times, Algier 15 times. I mean, Mariota had 6 carries. I think this was the first time we consistently saw opposing ball carriers fall forward. That's part of being sound tacklers. It's not only making the tackle, but it's not giving up those extra 1, 2, or 3 yards where the ball carrier is stopped and he's not going to break free for a big gain at that point, but he's pushing the line forward, and instead of a 3rd and 7, it's going to be a 3rd and 4, or whatever the case is. Instead of a 2nd and 9, it'll be a 2nd and 6. Like, those are big yards. And I think we heard on the broadcast on Fox watching the game, if you were watching at home and you weren't out in Atlanta, in Atlanta watching the game, you heard the broadcasters, the team, say multiple times, those are the plays that keep a win from, or that keep a win, that allow you to win the game, that keep you ahead, that move the chains, that avoid a loss for you. Those are the plays that do it. And generally it's the Niners coming out on top of those ones, both offensively and defensively. They're gaining those extra yards in their run game, and they're not allowing those extra yards defensively. But again, the script was flipped in this one, and you have to credit the Falcons, who, again, playing without their starting running back and Cordero Patterson, but they kind of did a running back by committee approach, and it worked. And I think maybe the other thing that just popped into my head is, I think we have confirmed that there's no other running back on this roster that Kyle Shanahan trusts other than Jeff Wilson Jr. and maybe to a certain extent Tevin Coleman, even though he was just added. I mean, we saw Ty Davis Price get back in for some snaps. I know he was in there for at least one offensive snap, but he was as a lead
he's mainly
blocker
on special teams.
And his one offensive snap that I saw, he was a lead blocker lined up in the fullback spot for a Deebo Samuel run. I mean, he's not touching the ball. Jordan Mason is not going to carry the ball for this team. And those are rookies. It's not knocks on them, but it's clear that Kyle Shanahan does not trust them. And when Jeff Wilson Jr. isn't doing well and you can't get Debo Samuel working in the run game, suddenly you're just at a loss. What options, who can you turn to if you're not going to trust two of the running backs that you dressed? It makes things difficult for the 49ers in the run game. And maybe this game was an extreme because they had to throw the ball 41 times, but still, this was a bad game for the 49ers rushing attack. And it's pretty clear that there are not many ball carriers that at this point Shanahan trusts.
Well, one of them was on the team last year, is JaMychal Hasty. Uh,
He
I
had a
think
big touchdown for the Jaguars
he
today.
had a 61-yarder earlier today.
Yeah.
I thought I recognized that guy when he was running to the house. Yeah, no, I mean they waived Marlon Mack, or released him, I should say. He's, I don't know. Like we're gonna find out what they choose to do at running back, but that absolutely has to change. Like that's how they win and lose games, specifically on offense. You did mention something. Sorry, I think it was early on there. Oh, it was about people listening to the pod if they were in Atlanta. That is to me the one positive from today. That it did sound like there were a lot of 49ers fans in Atlanta today. We heard a lot of juice calls. We heard a lot of defense calls on third down. At least, well, until the 49ers decided to stop playing defense. I just like that. That to me is maybe the one positive. I know. Look, Brandon Ayuk was really good today. I know George Kittle. I know a lot of the garbage yards and receptions were towards the end, but he was also featured quite a bit on offense. Maybe those two guys who we've highlighted in recent episodes deserve some credit. But I do think the fans probably deserve the most credit out of any 49er today for showing up to a road game and continuing to show the league that, look, the 49er faithful are all around the country. They will travel and they will invade your home, win or loss, apparently.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. That it kind of felt somewhat like a home game, or at least more of a neutral site game. The Niner fans travel well. To your point about positives, I'm in agreement with you in terms of the garbage time stat lines. I mean, I think that's mostly what it was for Kittle and Samuel. I mean, I know you and I were talking. You got George Kittle on your fantasy team, and that garbage time
gobbling up
drive,
yards, Mark.
that garbage time drive turned an okay game into a really good game for a tight end. So congratulations there. But I would say I wouldn't make that argument for Brandon Ayuk. He was really good in this game. He finishes 11 targets to lead the team, 8 catches, 83 yards, and the team's only 2 touchdowns. He did have some garbage time catches that kind of pumped those numbers up, but he was the most consistent, reliable, open receiver. He was beating defensive backs a lot, especially in that first half on those touchdown drives. It was the Garoppolo to Ayuk show in that first half in those 2 drives. He was really good in this game. I know we mentioned at the top, Shanahan has been singing his praises despite the fact that the numbers haven't been there much to this point, saying he's, quote, playing his ass off, blocking really well, still running routes well, even though the ball isn't getting to him always. Maybe this is kind of the turning point in his season. I know a lot of people, both inside and outside of the 49ers organization, were kind of predicting an Ayuk breakout this season. It hadn't happened up to this point. This is by far his best game of the year numbers wise, and Shanahan will say numbers do not matter. You can play well or play poorly, doesn't matter what the numbers are. But certainly he had a really good game today, and I would argue that one probably stands up more against the garbage time test than the Kittle or Samuel numbers do. So credit Ayuk, good game, and we'll see how he looks moving forward, if maybe he's found something in his relationship and chemistry with Garoppolo. So only time will tell there, but I think a step in the right direction for Ayuk.
Yeah, the only time that we are going to shine favorably on 41 pass attempts for Jimmy Garoppolo, at least Kittle, Debo, and Brandon Ayuk all had double-digit targets, which his fans seem to be clamoring for each and every week.
I would be willing to bet that will not happen again this year. They will not all.
Hopefully not. Doesn't sound like it's a recipe for success.
Yeah, if it does, they'll probably lose that game too.
There you go. Well, even though it was a loss on Sunday for the 49ers, we appreciate you sticking with us on the 415ers reaction episode every single Monday. We'll be back on Wednesday and then, of course, Friday every single week on the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network. Download, rate, and subscribe to the podcast. 5 stars only. Mark, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday, man.
Yes, sir. See you in a bit.
All right, everyone, take it easy. You've been listening to the 415ers podcast. We'll talk to you next time.